If you are out there today, I have a question for you. Do you want to be a multi-brand man or woman, somebody who creates time and financial freedom? Do you want to create a business, or do you want to create busyness? Do you want to create a business that exists to serve you, or busyness where you're perpetually distracted and overwhelmed and it's just you and your van? You really don't have a business. You just have created a job. A terrible job, a job that requires you to work 80 hours a week and that no one would ever want, and requires you to never have a day off and no vacation. Is that what you want? Or do you want to create time freedom and financial freedom? If you want to create time freedom and financial freedom, then this is the show for you.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrive Time Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here.
Yes, 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 and yes. Thrive Nation, on today's show, we're talking about the mindsets that both win and lose the entrepreneurship bet. I want to ask you this question here, Mr. Matt Klein. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me on the show today.
I don't know what it is, if it's the lighting on this microphone or what, but you sound like you're looking beautiful.
I'm proud.
Okay.
I've never quite heard it like that before.
Well, I don't
sound like you look.
You sound like you look great today. Yeah, feel free to steal that, by the way. It's usually good for one courtesy laugh. The second or third time you try it, you might get a little okay. Now, okay, so I want to ask you this here, because you have worked with hundreds. Is it safe to say you've worked with hundreds of OXI Fresh
Certainly.
franchisees?
Yes, and franchisees just from other brands as well, just living in the franchise space for many years now. I have the luxury of talking to franchisees that own multiple brands or that are thinking about, coming onto OXI Fresh. So, yeah, I have the luxury of talking to many different owners from many different businesses and certainly many different ownership styles and personalities, too.
Now, I want to make sure the listeners understand this as an example. David Robinson, the NBA Hall of Fame basketball player and a member of the Thrive Time Show investment team, he actually owns a bunch of Jimmy John's. And you might say, well, why does David Robinson own Jimmy John's? And he owns 3% of the San Antonio Spurs, and he owns some hotels, and you might say, well, why does he own all those things? Well, David Robinson is a phenomenal operator and has built a great management team. And in the world of franchising, it's not very uncommon at all to find these multi-brand franchise owners, which is a franchise owner that might own an OXI Fresh and a Little Caesars and a Sports Clips and a 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And Matt, how common is it? I mean, aren't there entire conferences now dedicated to where multi-brand franchise owners get together?
There are, yeah. There's certainly a difference between someone, dipping their toes in and starting off with one brand. And I think, most people need to do that, right? They need to figure out, what their strengths and weaknesses are before they really jump into multi-brand. But those that do kind of have, aspirations of, building an empire per se, or having multiple income streams, a lot of these guys are very goal driven, right? When you talk to them, they say, well, my goal is to have this many units of this franchise and this many units of that. Whereas the individual franchisee that's just starting out, they just want to be able to have multiple employees so they can continue to grow and make more money on a day-to-day basis. So it's just the evolution of taking that one territory, one franchise, growing it to multiple locations, and then, eventually evolving to a variety of income streams via multiple franchise companies.
Well, let's compare, and we'll give these 2 character types, 2 mindsets. We'll give them a name here. So you have the multi-brand man versus the one van man. The guy who's got. Have you ever met somebody, Matt, who owns a Domino's?
I have.
Have you met somebody who owns a McDonald's or multiple McDonald's?
I have.
What about multiple Subways?
I don't know
Jimmy
about
John's.
Subway.
Jimmy John's?
Definitely Jimmy John's.
I'm hungry. I'm thinking about food. So you've met people, though, that own multiple franchises. This is very common. So let's talk about the first mindset that you see most common with the multi-brand man. Let's talk about their approach to training. The guy who's got a bigger company, what is his approach to recruiting staff and training, and how does that contrast itself to the one-van man?
Yeah, I think mostly when you look at with these types of owners, this is not a small part of their business. I would say this is probably the biggest part of their business. They are absolutely training organizations.
Yes.
So they have spent the time with the people that they have available to them, whether that's their managers, whether that's their ops team, where they are running training courses within their franchise businesses. Right. The one-off owner is going to be basically, yep, I got a new guy. I'm going to go out in the field. I'm going to train them and make sure they're able to do their job. Whereas the multi-brand, they have a training organization within their franchise. And there is so much time and attention paid towards monitoring that process and reporting back and having goals associated with each level of that business, whether it is a manager that you're hiring or it is a technician or if it's a hair salon. One of the hair salon, technicians, whether, they're benchmarked in terms of performance and they train off of that as well.
Now, I want to share this idea with the listeners, and I want Josh with Living Water Irrigation to be able to ask you some questions about this. Matt, before I knew you, I started a company called DJ Connection, and before we sold it, to give the listeners some context, we did about 4,000 weddings a year, or events a year. So you had, 50 guys, 80 guys, a lot of guys DJing, vans, think about all the equipment, all the mothers of the bride, all the details, all the checklists, all the songs, all the licensing, all the lighting, all the breakage, all the traveling, all the logistics, all the hotels, a lot going on there. And when I sold the company, the new owner did a phenomenal job in many, many areas. And one thing I thought he did a good job of continuing was a training culture. However, my Monday morning meetings were kind of like the Super Bowl of training. Like every Monday, the team knew that I was going to bring something hot, And years later, I asked some of the guys later who moved on, and I said, why did you ultimately leave? And they said, the only reason I stuck around at all was for the training. And you taught me how to become good at business, but you also were the first one to tell me how to save money to buy a house, the one how to pay down my debt. You taught me how to stay married. You were like my mentor guy, and I looked up to you. And I heard that over and over and over and over and over. And then I went back and interviewed some guys who didn't stick around at all early on. And I'm like, well, why didn't you stick around? The pay was great. The hours were great. And they said, you weren't the kind of guy I wanted to be like. And I'm like, what? And they go, you were like always frantic. You're always running around. You're always overwhelmed, stressed. You never had a plan. It was just crazy. And I couldn't be around it. It was just that crazy. I didn't want crazy. So I knew that if I worked for you, I would become crazy. Can you talk about the value of training as it relates to retaining employees, Matt, within the franchising world?
Yeah, certainly. And I think this can't be overlooked. I mean, if you have an employee that is trained and confident in what they're doing, they're just by nature going to do a better job, right? They understand what they're doing and the why behind what they're doing and maybe certain aspects of their day that they're doing, like, for instance, reviews. Right. Oh. Yeah. Get the reviews. Why does that help you? And what is it going to do for your paycheck? So the owner of that business, whoever's training, what they need to be able to do is individually look at these people that are working for you and understand that not everybody is equal. Right. Some people need a little bit more attention paid to maybe customer service. Some people need a little bit more attention paid to time management skills. Right. So basically being able to provide an environment where all of the people that you have hired can be as successful as they want as long as they're effort driven, right? So they're not going to their job with holes in their training saying, crap, I don't know what to do now, right? They're laying out every piece of the process so that person has complete confidence when they go to their job day one to say, I can do this very well at a high level. If you don't get them to that point, then what you're going to see is people start cutting corners because they're not comfortable with the process. When you start cutting corners, then what you're trying to sell is defective, or what the service that you're trying to do is defective. And you'll start to see trends and where things are really lacking. And then a bad manager is going to say that employee is not doing very well. They're not really cutting it. Where in actuality, they don't have the resources available to be successful because you didn't give them that to begin with. And they maybe don't feel comfortable asking for those other maybe, more detailed steps and how they can be better in training. So it all goes to the training process and how structured that is.
I think this is something I want to share with the listeners out there. I think everybody who listens to this show knows this at this point, but I think it's so important that this season, as you watch it happen, just understand. I'm not from New England. I don't particularly like or dislike Tom Brady. I'm just enamored by the perpetual success that is Bill Belichick. How he won with the Giants, how he won with the Patriots. He had this training culture. And what's crazy to me as a Patriots fan is every year, and Matt, you've followed them well enough to know this, they lose their best players every year. So many of their great players over the years have left, and as they lose great players, they just reload. It's crazy, but they'll lose like Trent Brown or a Randy Moss or all these names that you're going, oh, they can't possibly win without that guy. And then they come back and reload every year. And I'm a fan, but I don't really know how they're going to do it. And every year I'm like, how's he going to rebuild this year? Well, I found out the other day that these rando offensive linemen that he has been following, shadowing, recruiting, trying to get them to play in New England, he's recruited guys that I've never heard of before who are now replacing last year's guys. And if he ever stopped that training culture, they would lose. Josh, you're a small business guy with a team of around, 15 people or so?
Yes, sir.
Talk to us about the or ask Matt any questions you have about creating a training culture.
Sure. So I think what it really comes down to for myself, and I think a lot of small business owners I know, is just being self-aware. It's just being understanding of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and surrounding yourself with people who can mitigate your weaknesses. So my big question for you, Matt, and I guess this would be for a lot of people out there, is systemizing your training. So we were talking about a mastery checklist earlier off air, but whenever you look to systemize things, how in-depth are you going on your checklist and your videos? I mean, is it literally where you could take a fifth grader and take him out to be able to execute what y'all do, sir?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think for different businesses, you will see different things that are needed, right? If you're working in an office space where the environment is typically the same, you want to have some pretty detailed checklists that you can basically repeat every single day. Some of the challenges that we have are that the environment changes, right? Because we're going into people's homes and keep people's buildings. So what we do is we do the checklist thing, and in terms of training them on how we do the cleaning system, that is simple. We can do that. That's actually not the hard part of what we do. The hard part of what we do is really trying to engage with that employee and understand what their strengths and weaknesses are when it comes to customer service and how they run their day. Because if you don't spend enough time with that that technician, you're not going to know that. Okay, so if you just train them on the cleaning system, you're about halfway done.
True.
Okay, so that is very checklist for us. So you can do that. Boom, you got to mix your product right. You got to do call aheads. You got to check your schedule a few days in advance. You got to make sure that your vehicle is clean. You got to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time to be there, right? You got to do all those things. Those are very easily trained, right? Because it's the process and it just keeps happening all the time. What we really need to be able to do is say, okay, this technician does have a great amount of customer support. They can think on the fly and they can actually make a bad situation very good. Okay, so that's fine. You want to make them better. They're not ready to go in terms of perfect right there, right? So you don't just set it and forget it. You want to keep, looking at that. But you also might have someone that says, I'm not comfortable when things change, right? Things are always changing. Or if I have a customer that's difficult, you see that they always struggle, right? That you're going to have to make some decisions. You're going to, on the fly, be able to walk them through that, be available to them, right? Because a lot of what we do is training on the fly once we've done all those checklist items, because the environment changes. So your question, I think, is really going to be answered by the industry that you're in and how many things you can automate. You should automate every single thing that you actually can automate and track. For those that you can't automate and track, you need to be able to spend more individual time with that person to develop their skill set. And then they'll take that on to wherever they do down the road. But in the meantime, when they're with you, they'll get better and better day after day and more comfortable.
Back to the Patriots. Think about this for a second. Trent Brown, I want to make sure I get this right. Trent Brown is a 6'8", 380-pound wall of a man who left the Patriots. And they replaced him now with this guy named Isaiah Wynn that I've never heard of. And it blows my mind. I mean, Matt, you're a fan of sports. Isn't it crazy how the Spurs every year reload and the Patriots every year reload with randos? And you're doing it in Denver right now, by the way. Your team, the Nuggets, are reloading with randos. Isn't that amazing, that culture of how it can change with random non-stars?
Mm-hmm. I think the craziest thing about the Patriots is that you can have someone that's been super good, really athletic, very talented on another team really thrive.
Yes.
But that individual employee, if you will, cannot fit into that structure because they've never had it before.
Right.
Right. So in terms of, you might have some all-star, all NFL type guys that have gone to the Patriots, but they can't fit, right? Because they don't fit the system of success that they've shown. So you got to have that fit. That's a very good example of, not everybody works together for the right reasons, and you need to be able to see that and then change and not be afraid to change. Because the faster you do that, the better you can have that win come in and help you, win next year.
It's crazy stuff that Bill Belichick does, which I think the listeners should know. I think it's hilarious. One is whenever it snows, he makes the team practice outside, which is hysterical because they have a domed facility they can practice in. Matt, whenever it's like not raining, he loves to shower the field with water hoses and make the field just nasty and muddy if he knows they might play in rain the next day. He has this thing called the Hills, where if anybody gossips, they just run on the hills till someone throws up. He's got all these rules, and if you watch Hard Knocks and compare that versus the Browns coach last year, it is impossibly different. It's like they don't have anything in common. And I would argue that OxyFresh as a brand doesn't have anything in common with the local carpet guy that won't wear a polo. It doesn't have anything in common with the local carpet guy that Matt's going to try to get Google reviews when he can. OxyFresh has nothing in common with, hey, send me a voicemail and I'll try to call you back. You have a scheduling center. OxyFresh has nothing in common with these carpet companies that aren't on top of their technology. I mean, Matt, don't you agree? I mean, OxyFresh, is it perfect? No. Could it be improved? Absolutely. But don't you feel like the OxyFresh culture is one of a training culture and one of just let's get better every year?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the values that we have is our ownership is really dedicated to changing. I would say in most cases, we're first to market, whether it comes to our services, whether it comes to our customer engagement skills, whether it comes to, actual marketing techniques. That's really great. But just as you guys are speaking about, those systems, it does trickle down to the franchisee. And I say it very simply. You have better tools, better resources, better support, and a better cleaning system. But if you don't utilize those things to your advantage, you are like all those other carpet cleaners.
Now, I know in the history of OxyFresh, there's never been a bad franchisee. Certainly not. Let's think about other brands, because you've met a lot of people in the industry who are very successful. Talk to me about. We talked about training. Now, talk to me about the mindset of always recruiting and not accepting mediocrity from the team, of the multi-brand man versus the one van man. It seems like the one van man likes to hold on to talent that's ripe and rotten, while the multi-brand guys always has a pipeline of new people. He's never done recruiting. Talk to us about the mindset of the multi-brand man versus the one van man.
Yeah, the one van man is tough because you're so reliant on that one person that it's almost debilitating if you lost them. And I've seen this over and over again in many different forms where, it's the end of the world if an employee doesn't work out. Right. Where the multi-brand, they've gone through the shuffle. They've gone through that process where they've lost guys that they thought were going to be with them forever, and they've had to adjust. So their mindset is, I'm never going to be in that situation again. And I'm recruiting a point where I'm ahead of the ball. I'm ahead of the game, to where if I lose someone unexpectedly, which you should prepare for, then you're already there. And in most instances, you're going to have somebody that's better, right? Because they're not going to put you in a bad, precarious situation. It's going to hurt your business. So, some of that is fear. Some of that is not experience, whereas the multi-brand person's been through it and doesn't want to be there again. Any successful company in the country is going to go through multiple employees, and you need to be prepared to do that and realize that it's not the end of the world, and you're just going to have to adjust, and it may just cause a few more hours in your day that you're going to have to spend doing that.
Oof. Okay, Josh, you have time for one more question for Matt Klein, who's always just he's always ready to go, my friend. So, Josh, what is your question for Mr. Matt Klein?
Hey, Matt. So to piggyback kind of off of what you were saying a little bit earlier and then what Clay alluded to there about the people that don't line up with your culture, the people that don't line up with what y'all do. So I think maybe somebody out there might need to hear this, but you got that guy who mows yards for a living, and he has this one dude who's just a rock star at weed eating, but he never shows up on time. He's got this other guy who's great, but he cusses in front of homeowners. He's got another guy who just flat out won't get reviews. So whenever you look at your successful franchisees and the guys that are winning, how do their staff line up with their culture and line up with who they are?
Yeah, that's an important one because I do think you weight certain skills over others, and a realistic owner that's going to look at the next level. Because here's how you should look at it. If if he's a rock star at some things and it works for him or her, that's great. However, what if you had 15 people doing the same thing? Is that scalable? Now you have 15 people that aren't showing up on time. Now the little problems that one employee has now is a huge problem because you have 15 people doing it with 5 different customers a day. Now you have a business that now you're only working with problems, right? So if you should be honest with yourself and create a checklist that you don't deviate from.
True.
And if you have somebody that is going down the list and say, man, they're good at that. Man, they're good at that. But gosh darn it, they are not good at this. And they've never been good at this. What it tells me is they have an unwillingness to learn. They cannot train people because they themselves are not willing to change. And if they aren't willing to change, it means the priorities of their day and their life they do not align with your business. So it's not okay for them to be really great at one thing and not great at another. That tells you that they do not care. If they don't care, they're not going to basically pass on great skill sets to your other employees because they themselves are not, adopting things that you feel are important, and you are paying their paycheck, so they need to get on board.
An example of the culture, again, giving a sports example, thinking about the San Antonio Spurs, Popovich, do you remember Bruce Bowen there, Matt Klein? Bruce Bowen?
He's an announcer now.
Well, Bruce Bowen was a very, very effective scorer in college.
He's the bow tie guy, right?
Yeah, and he could just score all the time. And he became sort of a vagabond, trying to make the NBA development league overseas, trying to get his spot. Because he was an offensive powerhouse in college. He goes to the NBA, and turns out everyone's good. So he goes to the Spurs, and Bruce Bowen and Popovich had a conversation, which I've read about in multiple different accounts. But it basically went like this. If you want to be on the Spurs, you will only shoot 3-point shots from the corners. That's your shot when you're open. Shoot that shot and play crazy defense. Like, I want you to conserve no energy on defense. Like, make it miserable for anyone to bring the ball up ever. Like, just wear people out. And he was like, okay, because he had no other options, and he was a very coachable guy. And he went on to have a very healthy career with the Spurs. And same situation. When they drafted Tim Duncan, David Robinson tells the story on one of our podcasts that they've drafted Tim Duncan, and David Robinson talked to Coach Popovich, and he said, David, for you to for this to work, you've been in the league 10 years now, 12 years. You're the MVP of the league. You're one of the top players in the league. We just drafted a young guy who plays the same position as you. I need you to defer to him and let us run the offense through him, And David says, okay. David comes back the next day and talked to the equipment guy and took the C off of his jersey, the captain, and put it on Tim Duncan's. And he was like, in front of the whole team, he's like, here's your new jersey. And like that kind of coachability wins. The idea that you could be one of the top 50 players of all time, and you're going to give the rookie the captain spot. The ability to change up your game and the way you've always played to win. That's an awesome trait. If you can find coachable people, you will win. And if you're a coachable person, and you've got a desire to create time freedom and financial freedom, I would encourage you to go to OXI Fresh. Check them out today. Go to thrivetimeshow.com. That's thrivetimeshow.com. What was that? thrivetimeshow.com/OXI Fresh. thrivetimeshow.com/OXI Fresh. Fill out the form and see what it's like to escape from the norm. See what it's like to not work in a small business where nothing's been thought through. See what it's like to work in a business where systems are the normal, where excellence is the standard, where the brand has 400 locations, where you're already topping Google out the gate, where there's processes for everything. And Matt, once they fill out the form, what happens?
Yes, you're going to get put with either myself or Mike. Mike Burton's a great, he's a franchisee of ours, but first and foremost, he's one of our development people at OXI Fresh. Or you're going to be with me or Mike, and we're going to take you through the whole process, introduce ourselves, walk through the process, learn about you, what your goals are, how that may align with OXI Fresh. Completely exploratory. Take us up on that. It doesn't cost you anything to learn.
Yeah.
And it might be the gateway for you to really understand there's better things out there for you.
And also, OXI Fresh, I just want to throw a quick disclaimer. We've had some people reach out to Thrive after reaching out to OXI Fresh, disappointed that they didn't have an availability in their market. How many markets do you still have open right now? Because I know that the listeners out there are
we have
probably
about
wondering
350 areas left. So it's very simple. You're going to get a text automated to you. It's going to be from me saying, hey, this is Matt. Love to speak to you. In a good time. And we can either just discuss, go through and look at territory right there if you have specifics you're looking at, or we can get on the phone and talk. Whatever platform works best for you guys, we can get there.
That is how you make it happen. Go to thrivetimeshow.com/OXI Fresh. And I encourage you to ask yourself today, do you want to be a multi-brand man with time freedom and financial freedom to show for it? Or do you want to be the one-man guy, the one-van man, the guy who, you have a close relationship with your truck and yourself because that's what your company consists of? You haven't really created a business. You created a job. If you want busyness, you wouldn't like OXI Fresh. But if you want time freedom and financial freedom and the opportunity to earn more, I'd encourage you to check it out today. Matt Klein, thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to go attempt to do some verbal cartwheels. And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!